Comments from the public are limited to site design and architecture only. Our board does not have purview over zoning issues such as land use, building density, flooding, traffic, etc. Now I'll run through kind of our virtual meeting protocols, which are atypical for our normal meetings. Staff will be controlling the PowerPoint presentation during the applicant's presentation. Applicants, if you could please ask David to advance the next slide during your presentation. Applicants, staff, and board members are required to give their name whenever speaking. Video and microphone has been disabled for all attendees. Attendees will only be given the capabilities to speak when they are called on during the public comment period. Chat and the Q&A functions have been disabled for everyone. During the public comment period, which I'm not going to go over since we do not have any members of the public registered to speak during that time. For board members,
Sure.
we have no recusal, so I will not cover that. Staff will be issuing meeting results, including staff comments and board motions to the applicant following the meeting. And for additional information, you can contact that email address or visit the website that's shown on the screen. And I do want to remind everyone that this meeting will be recorded. So with that, we could get started with item number 1, which is the DRB submittal requirements, review of the revised and updated DRB submittal requirements. David, will you be giving the presentation on this?
Or
is there a presentation?
Yeah, I mean, I have all the submittal requirements here. I didn't know if this was going to be just something like the minutes where we just vote on it. If you all got a chance to look over it before the meeting, because I thought it was kind of long to go over line by line.
David, there were some chat comments that I know were put in there.
Can you speak up, Dinos? I'm sorry. I was not able to get my audio fixed by IT, so I can barely hear everybody. This is going to be an interesting meeting. The sound of the fan of the laptop almost drowns you out. That's how faint it is.
I know a lot of people that would wish that as far as when I'm speaking, so not to worry. Can you hear me any better?
Yes.
Okay. There were some chat comments that were put on did you have a chance to look at those? Maybe not.
No, I did not. I'm not sure what you're referring to, chat comments.
On the Dropbox folder, there's an area for some comments. And I think Dinos and I put a couple comments just to test it, to see if that was something that could be reviewed by the team. And we could probably just go through those comments.
Yeah.
I didn't see them.
I didn't see them until somebody much smarter than me, Mr. Johnson, pointed it out to me, to be honest with you.
So that's in our Dropbox link?
It is on the...
Yes.
Yes.
Dropbox link on the right-hand side of that. There's a comments page, but we can
go through them.
Talk through those point by point.
And I do have 2 staff comments as well.
Okay, David, do you want to read those? Then we can just go into discussion.
Sure.
Because there's no public comment on it that we received. Obviously, there's no applicant questions.
So this has more to do.
So,
I'm sorry. Are you ready?
Go ahead, David.
So this has more to do with the fact that I have to add these projects into the system. This is a new process we're doing, and I'm finding out that there's some information we need at that time. So I'm requesting adding the line to provide the total cost estimate of your project for the site and building for determining the DRB application fee. And then the second one is add the line applicant to let city staff know who will be paying the DRB application fee, whether that's the applicant, the owner, or the contractor, and to have this person sign up for a city CAP account to pay the DRB fees. And then I also will provide the CAP link for them to sign up. But other than those two comments, I thought everything else looked good. And I was saying approval with the above conditions, above additions.
I think there were a
Thanks,
few,
David.
this is Dinos again, a few comments on page 1. One of mine was just very technical. On the second paragraph, I know that we only have one meeting typically in July and in December. And I'm wondering if the within parentheses, unless noted otherwise, should move to a point after each month. So in other words, it reads, board meetings are held at 4:30 p.m. on the first and Thursday Mondays of each month, parentheses, unless noted otherwise. So as opposed to putting it after 4:30.
I'd almost move that to the end of the sentence, Dinos, because sometimes we don't even. Yeah, and I would almost move it to the end of the sentence, Dinos, because sometimes we're in a different room if it's not on a Monday, if it's Monday's a holiday.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds good. And then the only other thing I would note before I pass the baton over to Mr. Johnson there is any part of an application does not conform. I would bold that, underline it as well, to make sure that everyone sees that. Because I know we've talked about the issues associated with items not in compliance and then coming before the board, and then we're having a discussion during the board. So it's just a point to make it even more obvious.
Sure, Dina, so I'm sorry, could you point that out again? Which one you want to underline?
The very last item, any part of an application does
yes.
not conform.
Yeah, maybe I could highlight it and put a box around it or emphasize it somehow. More so.
Very good, thank you. That's all I had on page 1. Jeff, I know you had some.
I had another thought about where it says that where is that?
Provide
it's in the
name.
the last red sentence. It says provide the name and contact information for the design architect. And
first page.
First page, yep.
Yeah.
That last sentence and the grouping of red sentences, page 1. It calls out design architect, and I think some of our presentations or applicants are not necessarily architects. Some of them are land planners or landscape architects. And maybe we ought to say design professional instead of design architect. And you might even say design professional in charge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. It sounds good.
I don't think either of us had any questions on page 2 or 3.
This is Andy. I had on 3, I wanted to go under the top where it said the multiple projects. It says site plan, streetscape, site plan, landscape. It says if desired but not required. I think that if we're looking at a multiple project or a multiple building project, I think at the very least a concept of how the landscape and how the landscape relates through the whole master plan should be required at that level.
I agree. I'm sorry, Andy, can you point out the paragraph again?
It's the first on page 3. It's the first bullet point under projects with multiple structures. Submit
Okay,
the following.
Yeah.
And then also on page 3, down under conceptual review, on title page, it says must include dates of all previous TRC zoning, BZA, or staff, and then it says VAR there. I assume that needs to be DRB.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And then the next section down, it says proposed architectural site plan. I think I should just say site plan rather than architectural site plan.
Sorry, Andy, I was still on the last one for
That's fine.
VAR. Where's this one
The
again?
the next section down, it says existing and proposed. Then it says architectural site plan and context plan. I think that should just be site plans rather than architectural site plan. And it says to scale, and it says 30-inch equals 1 foot. And I guess that should really be 1 inch equals 30 foot or 1 inch equals 20 foot after printing. I just want to, make sure whatever that minimum is something, that if it's blown up big enough that we can look at, that it's not.
Yeah,
I had a couple of comments on that page 3 as well. Once you're done, Andy.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, things like topography and that sort of thing aren't
Yeah, that was mine. It's
designated
just
on this
maybe
list.
correct. You could almost lump in the FEMA zone information and existing buildings adjacent to the property to an existing survey with topographical information, existing buildings, FEMA flood zone information, city required trees, any existing right-of-ways or easements, etc.
can you all hear me?
Mhm.
Yeah.
There was some kind of technical difficulty. I lost my whole screen for a couple minutes. I missed your last point, Erica. I think everybody's frozen on my screen again.
Saying on page 3. Can you hear me, David?
I can now, but it's fading in and out. I don't know what's going on. Okay, if you could repeat it, please.
Sure. On page 3, to combine the existing buildings adjacent to the property on all sides and the FEMA zone information into a checkbox with existing survey with topographical information, existing buildings on the site adjacent to the site, FEMA zone information, city required trees, and any existing right-of-ways or easements that may affect the project.
Okay.
Maybe as a suggestion, we could defer this item. It seems like we've got a lot of really good comments here, and given the technical difficulties we seem to be having, maybe it'd be best to have this conversation offline, or maybe send comments to David.
I'm going to have to go over some of these again because I'm not getting everything, and I'm a little worried about the whole meeting for being able to take notes because I can still barely hear everybody.
David, do you have any headphones?
I do.
Try using those.
Gosh. You are so smart.
Yeah, I would agree with that if you want to make a motion.
I'd like to make a motion for deferring this conversation and emailing comments to David for incorporation.
Is there a second? So we have a motion for deferral by Jeff. We have a second by Andy. I'll call roll now. Dinos?
Dino says yes.
Aaron?
Yes, in favor.
And myself, yes, in favor. So we will move on to item number 2, Maybank Highway at Fenwick Hall, LA, requesting preliminary approval for the construction of a new multifamily development containing 9 3-story buildings and 240 units. We've seen this one a number of times. David, I believe you probably do not have an overview.
Correct.
So Linda, if you can let the applicants in and unmute them, we could get started.
David, did the headphones work?
Apparently there's some setting I have to change, which I have not figured out yet.
Okay.
Because it's not recognizing them.
It usually pops up on my computer as a pop-up and you have to click OK.
Yeah, it is, but it doesn't seem to work.
Are we okay to let them get started, David?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to be making a phone call to IT, but they can get started if they're all on. Here.
Okay. Linda, could you unmute the applicants? Rivers, can you hear us?
Erica, this is Alan McMahon with the Beach Company. I'm not sure if Rivers is on, but can you hear me?
I can. Rivers appears to be on. We're just
Okay.
not hearing anything from him. He's unmuted. Kirby, are you there?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Okay. Rivers, Patterson, Russ, are any of y'all there? Can you hear us?
Hey, Jared. David needs again. I thought I would.
Kirby or Alan, do you want to get started or do we need to wait on Rivers, Russ, or Patterson? Or could y'all maybe text them to see if they're on?
Yeah, I'm reaching out to Rivers now, but
Okay.
start. I don't want to take up any of the board's time.
What's happening now?
We're waiting on Rivers, Patterson, and Russ. They're on. They're showing that they're on and unmuted, but we're not hearing anything from them. Kirby and Alan are on.
Erica, this is Alan McMahon again. Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
Rivers is on, but he says that he's muted.
He's unmuted. I'm showing him.
Okay. It's okay with us to go ahead. I don't want to take up any more of the board's time, and I understand, needing to keep the progress of the meeting going.
Sure. Kirby, do you want to hit on the architecture?
Yes, we can do that. And
Okay.
I don't know if you want to, are you getting an echo from me?
No.
A little
Okay.
bit, yes.
We can look at the architectural sheets, starting with the elevations, if you would like.
Okay, thanks. David, could you scroll to those, please?
Sorry, elevations.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
if you could skip over the site.
Is this a good place?
Yeah, if you could
Yeah,
maybe go about
the architectural
10 sheets to the
Yeah.
elevations, please.
It looks like Patterson's joining now. Patterson, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear y'all now. Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Great. Apologies for that.
If you could go, I think, 1 or 2 sheets back to the color palette right there. Perfect. So from the last review meeting, some of the comments were focused on the color palette for the project, as well as some of the detailing in regards to dryer vents and downspout locations and placements. So we've updated the architectural package showing the color selections, which you see here with some representative images, and then also the low profile dryer vent that were proposed to use on this one. We've also shown the dryer vents and the downspouts on the colored elevations, which was also a request. In addition to that, we provided a drawing for a trash enclosure and just some additional adjustments to the proportions, the batten spacing, and some of the color callouts. So, for example, you can see we're proposing coloring some of the soffits with that Olympus white, which is kind of the light blue color, if you will, which you see on that rendering on the south of the page. So if we want to just kind of go to the next PDF. And then in addition to that, there was also some questions regarding the windows. So this is showing the window design and in a comparable product. I think there was also a sample maybe delivered to y'all's office the other day. And then if you just want to kind of flip through the other elevations. So again, it's a little hard to see, but you can see on the lower image, and this is indicative of all the elevations, there's a little DS that is signifying where the downspouts are. We try to show them as best we could without them. I mean, they're painted white to blend in with the filled color, so it was a little difficult. You can also see the dryer vents are shown there, and then also the colors were adjusted a little bit to try to reflect the actual color swatches we selected. And you can just, so you can kind of see they're more of the same. This downspouts, dryer vents, adjusted the colors. You can see the beam, the drop beam on those corner projecting balconies was also picked up. So some minor detailing along those lines. And then if you don't mind going probably just to the trash enclosure, because it's a new drawing. So trash enclosure is added. Again, we're trying to get that to fit in with the color aesthetics of the overall project. If you go maybe one more page. Similar here, so you can see the drop beam was added at the top level of the wraparound balcony. Some of the soffit detailing is picked up with the batten trim and the colored soffit. You can kind of flip through it. Like I said, majority of the changes were fairly minor. Again, similar, showing some of the color palettes and soffit treatment.
How you doing? Good. I'm in the middle of a Zoom meeting right now, but I can barely hear from the laptop. Let me just tell them, excuse me, folks, I'm going to mute my system just for a moment.
And then if possible, you can go to probably the last couple of elevations of.
Does anyone else have access besides David?
David, could you advance the slides? David?
These are the entry designs
Like the
we've looked at
screen's
before.
present.
There wasn't any major changes there. And that's true for the next couple of slides. So I think as I mentioned, the majority of the items were the windows, downspouts, dryer vents, adjusting some of the colors and proportions a little bit. I think that's really all I had to comment on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Kirby, could you state your name and company for the record?
Yes, my name is Kirby Zingler. I'm with JHP Architects.
Thank you.
Eric, Patterson Farmer here. Seeing Whiteside, I'd like to turn it over to Cecilia Probst on our team to discuss some of the sign changes that we addressed from the previous preliminary DRB meeting. Cecilia, if you want to direct Dave where he needs to flip to.
Hey, this
Or,
is
excuse me, Dave, go ahead.
this is Cecilia Probst with Seaman Whiteside. Would you mind going back up to the beginning where the perspectives are?
Sure.
Perspectives.
David, could you scroll back, please?
Beginning of the perspectives.
Yes.
The site plans.
The Lumion those, the first one. So we took your suggestions from the last submittal and we studied the signage feature at the entrances, and we came up with a new sign that we feel better complements the buildings and the color scheme of the architecture. If you move forward to the next perspective, you'll see the before we were going with a darker gray one. The current one is white to match the buildings. I don't know where the other ones are. Yeah. You just had it there. So thank you for your feedback on those. I think the current ones that we're proposing are much better.
Okay.
And then aside from that,
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Hey, David, do you mind muting your line? Go ahead.
Just muted him.
Thank you.
aside from the signage, not much changed on the landscape end. We did add photometrics in at the end of the set for your review. But other than that, those were the big changes on our end. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything additional before we move on? Okay, do any of the board members have any questions for the project team?
This is Jeff. I have one question. The site lighting that was included in the package here, is that, I know that's intended to be the internal site lighting. Is that what's also proposed to be along the sidewalk, along the Pitchfork Road, or is that a different kind of light?
We have not specified the lighting along the Pitchfork Road. This is just internal to the site.
Yeah, Jeff, the any of the site lighting for Pitchfork Road is included in that, in the county's own set of plans and with their own consultants. That's totally out of our scope with this project.
Gotcha. Thank you.
This is Erin Stevens. I have a couple questions on the site plan. If you're finished, Jeff, I assume.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. One thing I noticed on the civil plans, it's still called out pervious concrete for some of the parking spaces, but then in the landscape plans, it looked like it was just pervious pavers. And I'm just curious if there's going to be any of like the poured pervious concrete, or it's all going to be pavers now, just because there's a discrepancy in the drawings.
This is Riverscape with Seaman Whiteside. We're planning to go with pervious pavers throughout the site.
Okay.
It was different on the site plan.
Okay.
But yeah, we're planning on pervious pavers for parking spaces and for the crosswalks and the main entry drive.
Okay. And then the second question, I also noticed in the landscape details that they called out along the plantation mix path. It specified in some areas mineral mulch, which looked like gravel, 789 gravel, I believe. And I was curious because I didn't see in the plan where it specified where that was being used instead of a traditional organic mulch planting bed. Is that something that we can see where that's going to be used?
Would you mind going to that detail on the sheet?
Sure. It's on L 2.1. David.
Okay. I'm sorry, can you say which page again, please?
L 2.1.
Great.
And it was detail 7. So the top label showed that the plantings adjacent to the path were going to be in, I called out a 789 mineral gravel mulch. And so I was just where
I
that.
believe those are in some of the natural tree protection areas on the far right side.
Okay.
That's to limit any trenching in and or to minimize the impacts within that tree protection zone, right, Cecilia?
Mhm.
Okay. So I guess the question though is, it's not, I understand that with the plantation mixed path, but using gravel as mulch instead of like a organic mulch, that's what I was trying to figure out. But it sounds like it's not called out. And then the last question I had was for the, there's the large and small park structures that come up, that show up in the plan. And I saw elevations for one of them, but I didn't see elevations for the other, and I may have missed it because I know this was a long submittal. I think it was the last page of the submittal was I think it was for the large one. I was wondering if we had elevations of the smaller park structure as well anywhere.
This is Kirby at JHP. I thought they were included on the same sheet as the larger pavilion.
Okay.
I'd have to go back and double check.
Okay. David, if we want to pull that sheet up, it was the last page of the submittal for this project.
I've added some things, but this was the last one they included.
Yeah, it actually doesn't look like it made it to that sheet.
There is are you referring to the one at the end of the secondary entrance at the terminus of that? Because we do have it in a perspective, if that helps.
Okay. Yeah.
If somebody could let me know page number.
That would be at the very beginning of the submittal.
Move this.
Yeah, Dan, I think it was back at those perspectives that we were looking at earlier when we were discussing the signage revisions.
It's on page 32 of the submittal package.
There, yeah, that one. You just had it.
This one?
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Those are all the questions I had.
I have a couple more questions. This is Jeff. With the supplemental information that came in today's email about the exterior building lighting, there was 2 fixtures provided. One that kind of looked like a round can on a stem, and the other was a building mounted, I presume, sconce that was black in color. And I don't see where those are shown. Yeah, there you go. I don't see where they're shown on the drawings, and just curious to hear the strategy about which one goes where. And I presume that we have only submitted 3 lights, these 2 plus the pole lights. Is there any other building mounted lighting? No.
So the intent is to have the lantern light you see here at the building entry points, as well as the individual unit patio lights. The other light you see in this package would be used on the building where you need additional light, say maybe at the end of the buildings where you may have some dark spaces in between, building ends, and used as more of a general building light as needed, whether it's for signage or to add additional foot candles to the site. But the intent is not to add a bunch of extra building lights on the exterior of the building outside of these two types of fixtures.
So if I'm hearing that right, the balconies and the porches will be lit by the other light, the can light?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Gotcha. And is that the colors that you propose? Brown and black?
It's a possibility it could go to white. I think in those sample images of a similar project we did, I think it was a bronze finish. I wouldn't go with a black. I think that contrast is a little too harsh.
Gotcha. Oh, yeah. Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Kirby, this is Dinos Leolio. Just a quick question this is a simple one. On my drawings, it's the perspective that comes in after the view of the pond overlook. It's labeled view of streetscape.
Is there a page number, Dinos?
Mine shows page 32 of 98.
It was an overall site perspective,
Yes.
maybe
Just
in the civil
the streetscape.
renderings.
It is in the civil renderings, I
Okay.
believe is where it's at. I guess the question that I have is very simple. I mean, there it shows a very light roof. There you go. The light roof color. And when I look at the elevations, it looks a little bit darker, almost a charcoal or a dark gray. What direction do you guys feel that y'all are leaning right now? Because the lighter looks really nice. And I was just curious.
Currently we're proposing more of a charcoal. The shingles have some limited color palettes, and some of those grays can wash out pretty fast. We like the idea of having a little bit more of a contrasted roof element with the kind of light and light blue color palette of the building.
Okay, I was just curious. That's all I had. It's a nice project.
Any other questions? With none, we do not have anyone signed up for the public comment period, nor do we receive any comments on the city's website or via email. So David, staff recommendations, please.
City staff finds this is a nicely designed and well-proportioned project with well-placed amenities, the preservation of many grand trees and nice site furnishings. Staff would like to see more specialty pavers at the secondary entrance, as was done at the primary entrance. Staff comment 3 is regarding the notches in the roof. Let me add an illustration for this one. Regarding the notches in the roof of the building that are above the entrances, staff was first going to suggest to remove them, but then thought it might look interesting to extend the rafters so they are exposed in this area and connect to the eave. The rafters and the eave would be decorative in this notch. Sorry, let me get to that. Just point out where this is. So in these two locations, there's a notch above the entrances. And we were thinking that it might be interesting to have the rafters extend out here, just a suggestion. But that's all we have for staff comments, and we do recommend preliminary approval.
Thanks, David. Board discussion. Sorry, Kirby or anyone from the team, do you have anything you'd like to clarify from David's staff comments?
No, ma'am. We can look at addressing the notch, see if we can do something a little bit different there.
And that's only if the board adopts it.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Then time for board discussion and a motion.
This is Dino. The rafters are not exposed, is that correct? And the lookouts, they're all encased within, if I remember the details, within the context of soffit and fascia.
This is Kirby at JHP. There are some exposed rafters throughout the project, but they're effectively below the soffit line of the roof trusses.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Just the notches really don't bother me at all. I think that I will defer to the architect on that regard. I have nothing else.
Any other comments or a motion?
Before we, the applicant had sent over some additional drawings today, and we were asking about the single hung window at our last meeting. And I'm a little bit concerned that the windows not having a great depth between the frame and the trim might come across to the building as being a little more flat. And just looking at our DRB and recalling our DRB policy, is we talk specifically about the face of the window frame being recessed from the trim to provide depth, as if it were a historical window or a traditional window. Not historical, but traditional. And the trouble with these single hung windows is just that the frame is very close to the wall siding. In other projects, and you can zoom in on these details, would be a great example of the window itself being close to the trim. Any one of those top left. Oftentimes in projects like this, the window will be set in one stud. You see that triple header there on the head, detail window head. There's three studs there at the head. Oftentimes a window will be set in at least one stud to give that a bigger offset. That's the big concern for me, is we've got a big building and these windows are fairly flat to the trim, and it would provide a little bit more shadow and relief if the windows were recessed back as per our policy statement on windows.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Jeff. I think that would give a nicer shadow to the overall building.
Mm-hmm. The additional sections here were helpful, and I appreciate that. Certainly would expect that David, should this go forward in the final review, that he review these sections. The one wall section we received showed an enclosed or encased soffit, and Dinos, to your point, that there were some, you asked the question if there were other porches that had exposed rafters, and the answer was yes, but yet the section that we have didn't indicate that.
Mm-mm.
So there's a lot of detailing to this building, and it's wonderfully detailed, at least from these very conceptual, I know the information that's presented is somewhat conceptual in nature. And it's not until you get to the level of detail here that's shown on this sheet that you really understand what things are and how they're executed. And that execution level is important to the quality of this type of project. And just if if there's one positive here, the information that's been given is of a high quality. I just would expect David to review that for the other sections that are not shown, like the clubhouse or the other exposed rafters and some of the porches and how those things are detailed. I have a feeling the information's there, it probably just wasn't presented.
Thanks, Jeff. Any other comments or motion?
Yeah, I do have a comment, just because it wasn't clear in the drawings, and I'm happy to hear other board members' thoughts. Andy, you especially as the landscape architect, but I would request that, and it may be the intention, I just, as it wasn't clear in the plans, that the use of gravel, 789 gravel as mulch and planting beds be either eliminated or restricted to very tightly enclosed planting areas, in favor of using more natural, organic, native mulches, shredded hardwood or pine straw for the planting beds.
Yeah, I'm not real crazy about the idea of using the gravel. I've been sitting here contemplating it, and I wanted you to comment on it before I jumped into it. I mean, I would be happy if we didn't use the gravel at all, to tell you the truth. I think I would be more than happy just to see, hardwood mulch or pine straw used throughout the project.
Yeah, I mean, I think gravel can be okay in like really small enclosed places, like in defined planners, but I just hate seeing it large scale use because it spreads everywhere and it's just not a natural material.
And it gets covered up later with something else. And
yeah. But that's the only comment I have from a landscape site point of view.
yeah, I mean, I think overall the site has progressed very well. I think it's very attractive, both site plan and landscape plan. I guess, I just echo Aaron's comment.
Thanks. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion for preliminary approval with staff comments number 2. I think that's the only one. And board comments number 1 to recess windows further into the wall cavity to provide shadow and relief for our policy statement.
Hold on one second, Jeff.
Yeah, and I'd prefer those details to be shown back to the board, communicated to the board, I should say.
Sorry, recess windows further into wall cavity to provide shadow and relief in accordance with the board's policy statement.
Yes.
Okay.
Submit section details of all building conditions. Provide a lighting plan that shows locations of all building mounted sign lights, not signs, lights. And then eliminate gravel as mulch and use natural materials. That's it.
Okay, thanks. So I have a motion for preliminary approval with staff comment 2, along with board comments. 1, recess windows further into the wall cavity to provide shadow and relief in accordance with the board's policy statement. 2, submit section details of all building conditions. 3, provide lighting plan that shows location of all building mounted lights. And 4, eliminate the use of gravel as mulch and use natural materials. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Andy, second. Now we'll call roll. Dinos,
Yes, in favor?
Aaron,
Yes, in favor.
and I am also yes in favor. Thank you very much. We will now be moving on to number 3, agenda item number 3, 2280 Henry Tecklenburg, requesting conceptual approval for the construction of a new 1-story dialysis center.
So this is a new project. For those of you who haven't seen this, the red circle is the location. Henry Tecklenburg. Here's a closer view. And this is looking into the site. It's currently wooded. And then that's all I have. So I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Yeah, this is Randy Dover. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Ken, thank you.
Great. I appreciate y'all's time today. To go through the project.
Randy,
real
I'm
quick.
gonna, is 10,
Yes,
yeah,
ma'am.
that'd be great. Is 10 minutes about enough time for you?
That's plenty to go through this initial presentation anyway.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Quick overview. You see where the site is at 2280 Henry Tecklenburg Drive. It's adjacent to a memory care facility, and that's the only other project really on that side of the street for about a 2-3 block area there. There's one across the street as well. The site's 2.391 acres of land, the way we now have it determined. The owner of this is Dialysis Clinic, Inc. They're the largest not-for-profit dialysis provider in the country. Probably have over 300 clinics, and they have several in the Charleston area, including one that's over 38 years old that this one is going to be the replacement for. They're a good neighbor, and they've been there a long time and intend to stay. Their patient load continues to grow, sadly, and they need a new facility that can do the things the one they have can't be improved. So we're looking at this site. My firm, we're based in Nashville as well as Dialysis Clinic, Inc. We've done over 500 dialysis clinics in 38 states and at least 11 in South Carolina. So we're used to working all over, and we have a group of people that know dialysis really well. We also want to be good neighbors and do projects that are going to be long-time, well-accepted projects. DCI isn't going anywhere. They'll be around a long time, and they want this to be something that will last, and we want to follow your standards as best we can. This building's 13,419 square feet in size. It will have 30 patient treatment stations in it and home dialysis treatment area as well, with 2 home dialysis, home training rooms in it. There's a staff, again, when you look at if you move to the site plans and stuff on this, we're on a wooded site. And a couple of the things that came up pretty quickly was the driveway across the street for another facility. We needed to line up our driveway with that one. And so we're set up for that to happen. And then what happens with dialysis patients is they're typically dropped off. It's a 4-hour treatment, and most people are either dropped or a van drops them off from a medical group or something. And then they come back 4 hours later and pick them up. So we have 41 parking spaces in our most current site plan. Our civil engineer's been working with your folks in the civil review side of all this. And you're seeing here the landscape plan that was submitted previously with our site plans. There's an area in a facility like this, dialysis clinics, they have a need for probably at least once a week an 18-wheel truck to get onto the site and drop off supplies and materials and then get back out. And they usually do that away from patient hours. So we're set up for that to happen. There's a dumpster and all those kinds of things. We also have a permanent generator on the property to provide power in an emergency, or if y'all have a power outage in the area, we can still dialyze patients. Other outside features include a small pavilion for some of the staff to take a break outside of the facility. And again, we're going to landscape this thing very heavily. We want it to be like a park for both patients coming on and off the site, as well as the staff who will be there. Parking for staff will be most of that remote parking. And there's probably 15 people, 15 to 20 at the most, that would be staff at any one time. And that's just at a shift change. It'd probably be more like 10 or 12 out of staff. Patients, like I said, 30 patient treatment stations means only 30 patients are there. at any given time at a max. And they come and go in their shifts, typically coming in Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. The building we proposed is a steel framed building with brick veneer. You moved to some of these elevations here, I believe.
I'm sorry. Yeah, let me know when to advance.
Okay,
You
I'm
want me to
sorry.
go to
Yeah.
the elevation?
Right, yeah, these are fine. And in fact, if you want to jump on back to the perspective drawings that are colored and stuff, that's probably a better thing to look at.
We didn't pass them yet. Are they at the end?
Yes.
Yes.
There we go. There's a bunch of them. Go back one, please. Oh,
One more?
one more. Hold on. We'll just go back to the A4.3. That's fine, the last sheet there. Okay. Really, in this thing, these are kind of some perspectives of the building. Over on the top left, really what you're seeing over on the left is what's facing the road, and then we have our portico share and drop off on the right. The next one, the view from the driveway, is as you move across the site, and again, no trees or anything on this. It's just building massing. The door you see in the front left there is one that patients could get out in an emergency to an ambulance and get out of there if something goes wrong. The covered drop off, again, we want people being dropped off under cover in rain and other conditions like that, so we're protecting that. The other drawings, again, show more of the rear down at the bottom left, a little bit of the rear anyway, and then another sidewalk view as people walk up and around the building. And if you go back one, I think we have, okay, shows us in relationship to the memory care facility next door. One of the things is we're up, I guess, 3 feet at the most from where we were now to be 2 feet above the floodplain, which is a new requirement you have. So the building seems to be a little bit up or higher than the other one. The plan is, though, to use a brick veneer. We have a metal standing seam roof on this in a silver finish. Those awnings, same thing there. The building windows and doors and stuff like that, we usually use some kind of aluminum anodized, but we're going to work on something that's coated that'll handle coastal conditions a little bit better than just aluminum. So we'll continue to work on that. There's some light fixtures shown on some of the elevations on the building, and you can see those in that middle picture and some of the others. It's mostly around the sidewalks on the building that we want to give a little bit of light as they move along. That one in the middle there really shows some of that across the front. Again, it's a fairly wooded site. We have a lot of grand trees. You've worked with us really well to remove a couple that are not really in good condition and work with us to allow the driveway to line up with the driveway across the street. But we're going to maintain as many as we can, and we show that in some of the landscape and other site plans right now. This building will be fully sprinklered. And again, the items that go in this now, this is really kind of state-of-the-art dialysis stuff now. We have a huge water treatment room, which will create purified water for the dialysis machines. And so we have a huge water service for this facility. And we've talked about trying to make use of some of the water that's discharged from their RO to use for irrigation and other things on the property. We're looking into that right now. They use quite a bit of water, and a lot of it shouldn't just go into the sewer system if we can use it for that. Sure, if you need anything else from me, or I'll answer questions about it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any questions from the board?
Got a question. I'm just trying to understand the massing, and I see the elevations, and a roof plan on this would be helpful. Let me see if I have it.
Yeah, we should have provided that. I'm sorry that isn't in there. We have it. What's going on in between those towers is the roof slopes from right to left in that upper elevation and collects along the left side and downspouts, and they're collected, and that water's taken to the rear to the, we have a detention area back there. So all of our roof water is handled and treated that way.
So describe to me again what's happening.
Yeah, in that top elevation you're seeing there, I tell you, go to the next page. One more, that one. The bottom elevation there, that's the side on the, I guess that's the west property line. Again, it's all heavily treed down through there. Our roof will slope towards those downspouts you see on that side. We'll be collecting water there from the roof and taking that down underground to the water detention area in the back. Stormwater.
A low sloped roof. I gotcha. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
So all these gable thing, projections or masses, they are tall parapet walls. Is that what's happening? Like that one on that bottom elevation, the one that's kind of grossed out in the background. Is that?
Mhm. It is. I mean, all those are like little
the-
towers and stuff that go back on top of the roof. You're right. I'm sorry. You can see maybe in those section or the upper one there, you can see how the roofs go back a distance over the other roof. All the water from those roofs will be guttered and go around and drop onto the main roof. That's the low slope roof.
Super.
The only other one, the porticus share, we'll have downspouts on that that'll also tie in underground.
Mhm.
Explain to me, I have a question too on, it looks like you've got some spandrel glasses on some of the elevation, I think on this bottom right tower element. And then
Right.
on the other elevation too. Can you point to what is that?
Sure.
What's
Yeah, some of
happening?
those,
What's
yeah, what we're trying
happening
to
in
do.
the plan there?
Yeah, we're trying to do some aesthetics so the windows all, the building looks good, but we've got rooms where we just don't need windows, water treatment rooms and some of the supply rooms and things like that. We've got windows with spandrel glass on them. So at least as you drive by and look at this all looks the same, but that isn't vision glass. And some of the windows in some treatment areas and things like that, if we have a 10-foot ceiling, everything's vision glass, but if we had a 9-foot ceiling, then the upper one may be spandrel and the lower one is vision glass. So in this,
Can you look at, David, can we go to the plan and can you explain where those are?
yes, sure. Yeah. Oop, back up.
The
That's
floor
the other way.
plan,
Yes,
Yes.
sir. Floor plan.
I went back. Right there. That's it. Okay. Let's see if we can follow this one. The porticus share is in that, you see those two little columns floating freely up on the top there. All right. And that's, I guess, the east side of the building. And right below those, there is our main entrance into a waiting room. We have windows into that room. And again, that's the place where patients will come and essentially be checked in. They're brought through that door on the right out of that reception room into a patient prep area there. There's some scales. It's real important. The patients are weighed. And then they move over that whole section to the right there. That is the main patient treatment area. And the idea there is we have 30 treatment stations and we have all these, everything in there's a low wall. Everything in there is such nurses and techs can see every patient, can see their face and know that they're doing okay throughout the treatment. They have to keep an eye on them legally. And so we have these arranged in groups of 4 for the most part. And the techs and the nurses on the floor can see everyone. And we have windows, basically all the windows around that whole area are all vision glass, unless they happen to be like in a bathroom or
Okay, like there's a
That's the
patient bathroom there next to bay number 1. Is that
exactly.
That's
So
a
that-
window that would be frosted or spandrel?
It'll be spandrel panel. These are set up so they look exactly the same from the outside. They'll have a reflective, look to them that gives you an illusion that everything's just the same from the outside. But from the inside, that'll be, wall off. You won't even see the window where we have the spandrel panel.
Sure. And in the lower right-hand side of this page, you've got another patient toilet and a private treatment room there, and that would also be spandrel.
Yes, that's correct.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
That's where those are happening. Most of the others, almost everything else there is vision around the treatment floor. Again, I think we have an 11 or 12-foot ceiling overall with suspended lights, and then we have the tops of the windows at 10 feet in there. Maybe 11. It's 10 or 11 feet. I think we show it in a section. But
So you one more question, site related. I think you had mentioned that you're going to the finished floor is a couple feet above the natural grade there, or actually 3 feet.
Right.
And is the strategy for the parking lot to fill so that you come in at the same elevation as the site? And are you filling the site to achieve?
The civil guy can answer that better. And I don't know if Herb is on here or not, but the idea in my mind was the building pad is up higher and the main drive, and we drop off people in the porticus share. Obviously, we build that up, so that's a flat drop off. We don't want them tripping. Lots of these patients are in wheelchairs or on walkers. That's not unusual at all. The back can drop back off where patients are and stuff like that. So I don't see us bringing everything up to that height, just mainly the building pad. And then the parking behind the building where we have several more handicap parking spaces and stuff, that'll be up a little bit higher, but then we'll slope down into the area from there.
Do you recall what the flood elevation is?
I don't remember the number right now.
Okay.
Jeff, the existing topo is around 9 or 10 based on the survey.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
I know part of it's an X, part of it's an AE. I couldn't find.
Yeah, we got two groups.
Is that AE 13, Erica, or is it?
I couldn't find. I just was labeled AE. It didn't have the elevation. I very well may have missed it.
Randall, do you know what the flood zone is?
It's in 2 flood zones. There's an AE and an X. The X is, let's see, the building itself probably touches into the X. That actually is in the northeast corner of the site.
Right. So
And
you
then
would
the
be
AE is
compliant.
kind of the balance of it, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Do you know what
but
elevation's associated with that AE?
I think it's 10.
Flood zone?
Let's see, we got a high spot of 10 out on the property going over to 9 across the middle. So the 10 is in a little patch right in the middle of the building up there.
Right, but the
What is
elevation
the AE?
associated with the FEMA flood zone, the AE. Usually there's an elevation tied to the AE zone.
Yeah,
I don't
base,
know that,
base
Andy.
flood elevation.
Well,
Yeah.
it's 2 foot below his finished floor. So do you know what your finished floor's sitting at?
It says 13.
It's changing right now. Herb's been meeting with the group doing what the DRB, I guess, the other review over there. I mean, y'all DRB, the TRC. And they've come up with some things as of last week. In fact, the site plan you're showing there with 46 spaces, I think it's really 41 or 43 now. And they've reworked some things to make the grades work better.
And do you know how many spaces are required by code versus
think
what you're
40.
providing?
Yeah, I think 41 is what we've determined.
And speaking of
Is
the parking,
code-
oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were done.
That's okay. 41 is required by code, or 41 is what you're providing currently?
I think it's required by code and it's what we're providing as a.
Okay.
Are you finished, Erica? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Okay. If you flip to the landscape plan, which is either just before or just after the one you're on, I think it's just before. I noticed that some of the parking spaces are hatched, but I couldn't find a label. Are those going to be permeable pavers, or is that?
Yeah, it's some kind of permeable paving or pavement.
Okay.
And we're working on that as well. We're trying to take advantage of all those things and do, what we can to take care of the water on the property.
Okay, thank you.
Have y'all been through BCA? Yeah, y'all mentioned that you have some grand trees that are coming out.
Yes, I mean, Herb's been talking to, guys about the trees and everything else. I think we're all on the same page with what we're keeping and what there's a page or two further over to the left that shows what's existing and where the grand trees are and which ones would come out.
No, I guess what I'm asking is, has it been officially through BCA?
Yeah, the meeting itself with the board.
No.
No. Okay.
Have you been through TRC?
He's doing that.
Has he done it yet?
Available right now. He should be on this call. Did he show up on there as somebody as participant right now?
He is, yep. Herb, can you hear us?
Okay. I got a couple messages from him here. See what he's saying. Let me ask him. I'll put him on speaker.
I like it.
Yeah, Herb, are you available to be on the meeting? Okay, he says every time he talks, it doesn't allow him to talk. He keeps getting muted.
He's shown as unmuted.
Yeah, he's showing to not be muted.
Herb, you got something muted on your end?
No, I clicked on unmute.
All right.
So.
I can hear, we can hear him that way if that's okay with everyone
If that'll
else.
work with you guys, yeah, I've got him on a cell phone here. At least he can talk. Okay. Herb, talk to them about where we stand in your part of the review process.
All right, so the flood zone is elevation 11. That's why we set the building at elevation 13. Okay, we have been through TRC and we have our first round of comments, but we are going to have to go to BZA, but we had to have a subsequent meeting with Eric Schultz, which we had on Friday, and one grand tree removal. All the parking is where the staff will be parking, but up next to the building will probably be paved. Did I answer all the questions that were coming? But
I'm just curious, where's the grand tree that's in question?
it's a triple trunk.
Mm-hmm. Is it in the footprint of the building?
No, it's in at the rear, and it was conflicting with some of our parking. And we went out there twice, and both times he's looked at it, and he's fine with us submitting for removal.
The plan they have up currently, is it one of those two that are kind of like right in the center towards the rear? Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, it's one of those two, is the triple trunk. I remember that one.
Right.
Herb, could you state your name and company for the record, please?
Oh, sorry.
Herb Gillum with Johnson Lashover Associates.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, I have a few. If Randall.
Yes.
You had mentioned that part of the inspiration of the design was predicated on your contextual analysis of the area and your visit to Charleston. Is that correct? Did I understand you correctly?
Yes, we've been to the property a couple of times. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that for a moment? Just looking at the elevations and the perspectives that you've provided, what were some of the driving design issues that influenced the design?
Right. We started off thinking, and we did some presentations, some other elevations at a meeting we had with you guys probably 2-3 months ago. And we had a little bit more stucco and some other materials. And it seemed to be an indication that everybody wanted us to do a block building or something if we were going to use stucco. So we moved towards brick pretty quickly. And our feeling was, with the louvers and the roofs and the brackets, we have all these steel, metal brackets supporting these roof overhangs and all. We're trying to pick up on some, local elements, at least, I feel like kind of a low country look on some of that. The building itself and the brick, we want something permanent. The colors we have right now are, not picked for, positive. We got to go and actually pick the actual brick samples, but that's not the time we're looking at. We wanted to use 2 or 3 colors of brick so we'd have something a little bit more interesting, than just a monotone building. And you can kind of see, by the way, in that isometric, you can see the roof up there now with the little towers back on it. There's rooftop units on this project that divide all these areas in a lot of different zones to take care of patient comfort, and they'll all be screened from view. You won't get those, by the way. But
are all the mechanical units on the roof?
Yes, there are.
May I ask, why is the parapet, Jeff had asked earlier about the height of the parapet and the height of the overall building. Can you talk about that for a moment, why it's so tall?
Yeah, for the mechanical unit screening, well, most of the units will run as much as 4 feet high when they're mounted on a curb. And so the parapet are at least 4 feet tall all the way around, so all that stuff's hidden from view.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any additional questions?
I do. Just going back to the grand tree that was proposed for being removed. You mentioned it looks like it's one of these
exactly
two that are in this island here.
Yes.
Which looks to me like they're being called out to be saved.
This is the original site plan, but it's been asked to be changed in our first TRC meeting. So we have changed that and shifted the island so that now there's no row of parking that's running parallel to the building. It completely all is an island going toward the detention pond. And when we did that, we had to take out one of the grand trees.
Okay.
So
And it's the smaller of the two up on the right. That's the one that's the triple trunk one.
Yeah.
And it's splitting apart.
Any additional questions? We do not have anyone registered to speak during the public comment period, nor did we receive any written comments. So with that, David, staff recommendations, please.
Staff comment number one, the city does prefer if there are main entrances on the street side of the building, but we understand the need of the entry being on the side with the vehicle drop off. Staff asked that if there are no entrances on the sides, if there are no entrances on the street side, to eliminate the canopies that give the illusion of entrances. Let me go to, that's just referring to these canopies on the street side, the upper left image.
Okay.
Number two, staff was wondering why the building is so tall if only one story. The amount of space from the top of the windows to the roof eave is a little awkward. Number three, staff likes the large overhangs of this design, but the brackets need to be larger scale for this amount of overhang. Staff comment four, staff would prefer if the brick were all one color rather than the two-tone. Number five, where the portico chair connects to the building, provides some sort of illusion support in the form of a pilaster or half columns that goes to the ground. And that's referring to the lower left image. You can see where my cursor is, just along the building right here. Some pilasters or half columns would look good. And number six, regarding the fenestration that occurs where the brick is recessed. And I'm referring to, again, the lower left image. I'm referring to this right here. And then it also occurs on the opposite side of the door. Where the brick is recessed to the right and the left of the main entry, staff feels it would look better if the width of the glazing took up the entire recessed area from, the width-wise. And the same comment is also for the fenestration at the main entrance. So that's all I had, and with that, staff does recommend conceptual approval.
Thanks, David. Are there any items that Randy or Herb that you would like to clarify from David's staff comments? You don't need to go through them one by one, but if there's anything major.
No, sure, we'll get through them a little bit. The main idea of the height in these things is the treatment area in that is essentially like one giant space. And if you have a space that big, that's essentially 63 by 112 feet, anything less than 11 or 12 feet as far as the ceiling in there is, you just feel like you're in a cave. And we have suspended lights and other things in there. We want to keep that as open and, to keep the volume up in there as we can for that treatment area being one large room. We could drop maybe some of the other stuff down a little bit, but again, we like, 10-foot ceilings in the waiting room and rooms, but we'll look at trying to bring it down a little bit. Again, now that we've had to add a foot to this building, I guess on the property, it makes sense to also try to pull it back down at the top. But we keep the parapet up so we can hide the rooftop equipment, so we can see if we can't make sure there's no sight lines to see that if we're maybe 6 or 8 inches different than that. We try to create a lot of in and out on the building while trying to keep the plan as square as possible, because the treatment area in particular, the dialysis loops and traces and things like that, it's actually something that can endanger the patients to have turns and bends in their loops. They need to run straight so they can't grow bacteria and things like that in them. So we can stick bumps on the outside of the building more easily than we can take and go in and out in the space itself. So what we've tried to do with these different colors was also to kind of show that offset, that part of this building obviously projects out further than the other is recessed. think it's all one like color, you may not see those recesses as much as being emphasized like this, but we'll certainly look at it as color.
Thank you. There's someone that has some noise in the background. If you can mute yourself, that would be appreciated. All right, now it is board discussion and a motion.
This is Andy. I guess that from my point of view, the fact that we've got, we're hearing, we haven't been through BZA, the site plan's changing. I have some reservations, I guess, about going through or going forward till we can kind of see a little bit more about how this is settling out. I know that Eric says, yes, he supports the removal of the tree. But, the board actually hasn't voted on it. And then I just, I'm not normally someone to get too far into the building. This building really has no context to this area. I feel like it's huge. I mean, just from looking at these renderings, it's got all of these towers that come up and project and down, and I just don't have a real good aesthetic feel about this building. And I understand it's dialysis clinic. I understand that you have this big space in there that has 10 feet tall. I just really feel like that there's a lot more study that needs to go into this building. And then finally, I'll go, I guess, get back into my realm of things. Is I just feel like this landscape plan has a lot of restudy to do, a lot of plant selection restudy. The pond, just being totally sodded over, get some native grasses in there, break that up, have, a good kind of landscape design. I just think is missing an overall concept of design. I think is missing in the landscape.
Yeah, this is Dinos. It's obvious that Randy and his firm have extensive experience in the aspect of dialysis clinics, and obviously a program function he understands very well. There are issues architecturally, though, that when it's translated vertically, that I struggle with, and I think the biggest aspect is just first and foremost is just the complexity of the towers and the gables and everything else that are going on, and in spite of the suggestion on the elevation of undulation, there's really no undulation per se, or at least no significant undulation that speaks to the building form itself, short of going vertically. I think that there are other more successful resolutions that we have seen come before the board regarding the visibly screening mechanical units on a roof, short of taking the parapets as high as they are. And I think that from a contextual standpoint, when you look at the memory care facility next door and even the buildings around, when we're getting to that 25, 30, and 35-foot heights, it is, and fully understanding what Randy was saying as far as the need for a sense of volume within the complex, I think that it can be translated and probably shown so much more successfly if it were truer to the way that the function is laying out internally. I struggle right now architecturally, and in all fairness and out of respect for the architect, to even suggest a deferral. I just believe from an architectural standpoint that it needs to start again with a much more honest reflection vertically as this building is being translated. The differential in the brick color, for instance, is a lot of it is facadal. And I know that's one piece that we really work hard to stay away from, are facadal treatments. It appears very heavy, as Andy was saying as well. I think it needs to be lightened up considerably. And I also am wondering if by the time you respond to the finished floor elevation as it relates to the flood zone, that if it doesn't begin to provide a little bit more clarity architecturally as to how you might begin to look at the translation vertically again. That's about all I have.
Well, this is Jeff. There was a lot packed into that minute and a half conversation there, Dinos, and I don't disagree with any of it. And you could unpack that and spend 2 weeks unpacking it. The building, just counting the number of towers on it, it's got 8 towers that, yeah, they relate in that they are towers, but I think they could certainly be simplified. It seemed like there's a lot going on for what the building it is. I love your idea of the form of the building needs to follow the function. And I liked it very much, this idea of the room you talk about, Randy, that ought to be the whole point for the building. And I wonder if that room ought to be expressed the most, and then all these other things being subservient to it. It could be really interesting if that room were the architectural move and everything else is again subservient to it. I don't disagree with anything that Dino said. There's just a lot of direction in so few words, and I hope it's understandable. But I think one of the things that's interesting about Charleston architecture is that they did do a lot with a little, and we're doing a lot with a lot. And I think you could benefit from editing and finding that concept and let that concept be driving. One of the challenges I have with this particular design is that the gables are facadal, and when you get to the roof, they become just walls, and they become very, very tall walls at that. And I personally would encourage you to let the mass be the mass and try to find a way that it conveys front to back, rather than doing these almost like Western stage fronts. Let the masses be more genuine. So I think I would support that. It's a start over. Henry Tecklenburg Drive has become this really neat collection of buildings for the Charleston area. It's an interesting collection of mostly medical buildings that have some unique form to them that speak both to, I think, the region and also have a little bit of funkiness to them. And I would say that if this were to be built like it is presented, that it would be probably one of the more stead examples of architecture. And I think the street, the context can support a more, I don't know what you say, just a different approach to architecture. This is I'm not saying it has to be traditional or contemporary. I think there's probably some other issues with this design than can be labeled with those two labels. But I would say form needs to follow the function.
I think that as you begin to look at the change in elevation of the building, it may begin to suggest something lighter, and possibly the brick is retained, but there's a wonderful and very interesting material palette along Henry Tecklenburg that can be drawn upon. But I know that one of the things that we've all continuously pushed was, as Jeff was just saying, just a very simple expression architecturally that's more prevalent to the area itself. You're not downtown Charleston. you're not in an urban area. You're in, and quite candidly, the landscape palette should be inspirational in itself with all the woods and everything else around there and the ponds and what you have.
There's an interesting dermatology clinic that's right at kind of towards the end of this street that has some topography challenges as well. And the way that they've solved that building is really interesting. It does look like it floats. It's and it's clad in corrugated metal or something like that. I would suggest maybe taking a look at that, and that certainly has that lighter aesthetic.
Yeah.
I'm also a little bit, if this were my side, I'd just be a little bit more, I'd be real careful about the existing topography and rising up so quickly to get to the porte cochere. I understand that's a definitely programmatic requirement, but it seems fairly abrupt given the curb elevation is likely 9 to 10 or somewhere around there. And the porte cochere drop off is looks like it's a mere 40 or 50 feet away, and you're trying to get up 3 feet. It just seems really abrupt. So I'd be real careful about that too. I don't exactly know how to solve that other than just recognizing that that is a potential oddity. I think most things in Charleston are flat, and 3 feet. I know you're from Nashville, but 3 feet around here is a big mountain. So, and I think more than that, I think you just need to be, it's not a big mountain, but it is something that we need to be sensitive to designing around. This area used to be horse farms, and I think speaking to the plant palette, it could certainly speak to that sort of thing. It's sea forest, marshy, and it used to be horse pastures and not horse pastures, but horse trails.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the marsh is, I mean, that is an excellent reference from a contextual standpoint that might help stimulate some thought and design by just virtue of how the texture of the marsh relates with really successful buildings. I mean, you mentioned a good one, Jeff, also that is down on the corner. It's a metal-sided building. I mean, there are a lot of great examples and some soon coming as well that on this road that might provide some inspiration. I mean, I would be, I mean, it always pains me, and I feel confident that Randy knows that he can do it, but not to mislead him. I really do believe that the best thing that we could do out of respect for Randy is to move for a motion of denial. With the consideration of all the items that we've just talked about. And I'm certainly willing to make that motion unless someone else has other comments that could influence that decision.
So we have a motion for denial. Dinos, I'll need, if you want to include any of the discussion items in the motion, I'll need that
Yeah,
concise, a little more concise, that I can include in the formal motion.
I would move for denial, predicated on asking the architect to be more responsive on a variety of issues. First and foremost, context of the site as it relates to its neighbors. The context of the site as it relates to its surrounding vegetation. To emphasize the aspects of the functions of the building projected vertically, such as an expression of the sorry, I can't remember the name of the space.
The treatment area.
Yeah.
Sorry, so emphasize aspects of functions of
internal spaces.
specifically the treatment area.
Yes, particularly as an example, the treatment area. Simplify the design. And just be honest in the vertical expression. And then finally, be mindful of the material palette of nearby buildings that might provide inspiration. But primarily move toward a design that lightens the building visually. Andy?
Say that last statement again.
Yeah, that move toward a design that lightens the building visually.
Thanks.
Guys, help me. Anything else that I've left out?
I mean, I think the only thing I would do, I know you mentioned respecting the contextual landscape, but also to make the site, have the site and the building work with each other, from a landscape palette point of view.
Mm-hmm.
That the landscape palette reflects the architectural direction, and try to work within the native palette as much as possible, and including in your stormwater solution.
And I guess the final issue would be to be mindful that conceptual documents need to represent at least 20% completion of design development phase of documents.
Okay, so I have a motion for denial with board comments.
Oh, Erica, you're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry. We have a motion for denial based on board comment of the site as it relates to neighbors, context of the site as it relates to the surrounding vegetation, to emphasize aspects of functions of the internal spaces, specifically the treatment area. 2, to simplify the design. 3, be honest in the vertical expression. 4, be mindful of the material palette of nearby buildings that may provide inspiration. 5, move towards a design that visually lightens the building. And 6, with regard to the landscape plan, work within the natural plant palette. Did that cover it, Dinos?
It did, yes.
Okay. Is there a second?
1 second. This is Jeff.
Jeff seconds. Now we'll take roll. Aaron?
Yes, in favor.
Andy?
Yes, in favor.
And myself, yes, in favor. Moving on to our next agenda item, item number 4, 1325 Folly Road, requesting conceptual approval of a new car wash.
I've got just a little bit of context, show you where the site is. Here you can see the overall location from further back. The closer view, this is next to the new Publix development that you're all familiar with. And looking into the site, you can see to the left the Publix under construction. And looking into the site again, and this is looking through the site back out to Folly Road. And then this is the existing bank just to the north of it. And with that, I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Good evening. My name is Denny Gappins with Progressive AE, and we're the architects for Finn's AAA. Before I start, has Thomas...
Denny, sorry, go ahead.
Has Thomas Durante been added? He's our civil engineer. And I'd like him to give a brief overview of the site before we
Linda,
get into
could you
architecture.
move? Thank you. He's being moved in now.
Okay.
And Denny, will you need more than 10 minutes approximately?
We will not.
Okay, thank you.
Let me know when to advance, Denny.
Okay.
Linda, could you unmute Tom Durante, please? There we go.
Perfect. Tom, you there?
He's showing up and is unmuted on our end. Tom, can you hear us?
Okay. Okay, well, out of respect for everyone's time, I think we can progress into the presentation, and if he can get himself unmuted from his end, I'll let him chime in. And
Okay,
if we have any
thanks.
specific questions for him, I have him on text message so I can reach out to him.
Thank you.
Okay, David, you can. Do you have several trees on there that we're preserving? I won't get into too much detail on the civil stuff. If you want to hit the next one, David. And keep going. So this is our second car wash in Charleston proper. The first one we just completed is in West Ashley on Savannah Highway. This is an extremely tight site, just like that one was. And so we've began with the tightest footprint of the building that we can, and it still be functional for the owner. So this building is indicative of that reduced length that we had created for the West Ashley site. And even at that reduced length, we were not able to rotate this building and get it parallel to Folly Road, which was requested by staff at a pre-app meeting for us to look into that. So even with the smallest footprint, we have to keep it perpendicular to the Folly Road in order for the site to function. And the back of the site, you see the various tree saves that we're doing. You can hit the next one, David. So our planting plan, we utilized the same landscape architect that we did on West Ashley. We're very happy with how that site turned out. So we've had him produce this plan for us. Continue. Continue. So getting into site context, as mentioned, adjacent developments there on the west side of the street with us is Publix to the left-hand side of the building, some out parcel retail buildings, and then you see our building along with the screening walls. To the right of us is the bank, and then at the end of the block is a gas station. And across the street, there's several single-family homes that are now being used as commercial businesses. Go to the next one. And next one. And there's some better images of those. A little bit more of the context. Here's some of the Publix and the retail out parcel building and the gas station, and then our wooded site. Okay. So as mentioned, we started based off the site constraints and the site program. We started with a very compacted program. of reduce the square footage as tight as we can while still allowing for functional use of the program elements for the owner. We do have that a short link tunnel that we had developed for West Ashley site and use that as the starting place here. Go to the next one. So taking you guys through the elevations, this is on the front facing Folly Road. We've done a tower element at the tunnel exit, clad in architectural brick veneer, and at the top accented with painted horizontal board and batten siding to add a little detail to the top and a little texture. And then to the right, you see the lower volume that we've changed the parapet height on in order to break up the massing. And then this also is the equipment and back of house spaces for the plan. And here we chose a cement board lap siding and a simple shed roof. We're gonna hit the next one. I guess I should have started off by mentioning when we went and did the pre-application meeting with staff, we asked what their preference would be, having just gone through the DRB process for the West Ashley site. Do they want us to play or use the architecture of that site as a starting point, or if they preferred that we come up with a unique architecture for this site, and they chose the latter. So if there's any recollection of the West Ashley site, you'll see that while the massing is similar because it's program-based massing of the building, that the architectural language is a departure from the West Ashley site. So it does have its own unique character. So as we move around the building here to the, or go back one, yep, to the south here, this is actually fronting the parking lot of the Publix. We've introduced punched storefront openings into the wash bay. And then again, took the tower architecture and wrapped it around the front corner there. At the far right of this elevation, you can see the 4-foot high brick screening walls that are represented on the site plans. And then as we move to the back of the site, you'll see the vacuum enclosure, which we clad in the same architectural brick veneer as the building, and some of the same details, such as the water table that houses the vacuum equipment. And then you can go to the next one, David. At the rear of the site here, this is the car wash entrance. We show the door in the closed position just for reference, but that door will only be closed to the wash bay after hours. Over the pre-wash area, we always provide a canopy as part of the programmatic requirements of that space. And then at the left side of the building, you see the manager's office, which has a prominent corner there where they can see the entire queue of the cars as they enter. And then the dumpster enclosure on site. Our conceptual early on site plans that we brought to the pre-application meeting had the dumpster enclosure up closer to Folly Road, but based off staff feedback, we have moved that to the back of the site. And we can hit the next one. And here on the north elevation, which faces the interior of the site, you see that lower volume with the standing seam metal roofs and the lapboard siding for the parapets. And then we've started to create a little rhythm down this elevation to help create shadow lines by doing insets with the brick water table as well as the lapboard siding and some trim to help break up that facade. And then the last shot is a perspective view from the Folly Road standing on the adjacent Publix parcel. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you.
Was Thomas able to join us with the sound?
I think he's having trouble on his end. He called in, but he's not speaking through his computer, and I think that's what got brought in. I think he has a call-in number, and he's taking the meeting on his phone. So, unless there are specific questions for him, maybe we can leave it as is.
Okay.
Are there any questions for the team?
This is Andy. The screen wall that y'all have in front, is there a reason that it is a straight line? Is there anything that precludes it from?
It is just a straight line. It's actually broken into 3 separate runs as well. If David, you could take us back to the site plan, please. You can see it's the first length of it's broken by the sidewalk that connects the site to Folly Road. And then there's a 3rd section to the right of the drive.
I understand, but are there any easements on the Folly Road side that would preclude it from having movement in it or anything like that?
It looks like it is up against a setback.
There's an overlay there. But okay. That's my question.
I have,
Any other?
yes, I have, this is Dino, so I have a couple of questions, and thank you. And by the way, the project on Savannah Highway hopefully is doing well. It came out very nicely in the end.
Good, thank you.
Curious, and you're going to hear this during board comments. I want to ask you, looking at your website, you have some very playful buildings: Blue Water Convention Center, the Hanson Technology Center, Holland Energy Park.
Yeah.
Why so serious with this building and the design?
I wouldn't say the genesis of the design is well, in my opinion, wasn't about seriousness. It was, I think, more about simplicity and keeping a simple palette and not trying to scream too loud. And I think even as much as, you know, we had some blues and the blues and greens and West Ashley store, and we've really kind of toned down the palette to something we felt like was more agreeable.
I guess, I mean, I was looking at the playfulness that you have on Savannah Highway, and then I'm looking at this project here. Understanding all of that, and understanding that this is a car wash, and understanding that you have such a variety of different models, cars, years, everything coming in. I was just curious. You'll probably hear that comment again, but just was looking for a response. Thank you.
Any other questions? We do not have anyone signed up to speak during our meeting, but the city received 2 submitted comments prior to the meeting. The first is from Nancy Hadley at 1214 Grimsley Drive. I'm going to try and summarize what is relevant to our meeting. Both of the submittals were against the project. She talks about traffic and the safety, talking about use, which is not in our purview. And that's really it, just against the project in general. The second is from Cameron Mitchum at 959 Godber Street on James Island. And they are strongly objecting to the use, which again is not in our purview, and also citing traffic concerns. David, staff comments, please.
Staff feels the site layout work, that the long way of the car wash should face Folly Road. So we were looking at
David, sorry, David, you're echoing. Is everyone else hearing the echo?
He's reverted to Star Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're Donald Ducking.
Would it be helpful, David, would it be helpful for me to read your staff comments? David?
I was saying yes, if you can hear me.
Okay. Yeah, the staff comments are, one, staff feels the site layout needs work and that the long end of the car wash should face Folly so you are not looking into the tunnel from Folly Road, as well as a service door that faces Folly Road. We feel the attractive south elevation of the building is facing inwards to the site and should face Folly Road. 2, we feel that the slanted tower feature of the building should be eliminated / simplified. 3, staff would prefer if the building were all brick and no siding. 4, regarding the south-north elevations, if the tower is removed, staff asks that the 2 brick ends were to step up higher than it currently does from the middle portion of the building. And staff recommendation is deferral based on those comments. Clarify or respond to between the public comments and staff comments. You don't need to go through everything one by one, but just any general or major clarifications.
We did have a traffic study done, so
That's handled at TRC. That's not our purview.
okay. No, I don't think I have any
Thank you.
questions.
With that, we are in board discussion and motion.
I guess I'll start off since I'm opened it up. I don't know. One of the things that has been so successful on a few of the car washes that we have seen come before us, particularly the one further down on Savannah Highway across from the CVS store, for instance, is a playfulness. It's not so serious, and I just feel that there are grand opportunities as far as these little structures are concerned that could provide a sense of function with regards to what it is. It just comes off very serious. You have 2 very interesting horizontal bars coming next to each other on the floor plan, and yet you kind of lose that on the translation vertically. I think is it the west elevation, whichever one faces Folly Road, is the smaller bar to the, thank you, to the right is, with the hollow metal doors, I guess, with louvers, I don't think is what we would encourage the community to see as far as a face of the building itself. There are just a variety of issues here that it's a cool little jewel box that could really be developed even further. And again, I think that this architect certainly has the capacity and ability to translate this into something so much more fun. That's all.
This is Andy. I think that continuing with Dinos's comments is the site wall that's at the bank is far more interesting than what we're looking at here. And it kind of undulates and moves in and out, and unless there's something that's specifically precludes it, I would love to see, with whatever solution comes out of the building, for the landscape architect, the design team to try to continue that wall on and to work their landscape in and out with that wall. I think just looking at the landscape palette overall, I think is heading in the right direction. Most of the things look like they work very well. I think I would ask for something different than the miscanthus, but we could handle that at another level. But I just think that there's a lot of building design and site design things that they probably need to overcome before we get into that level of the minutia.
Yeah, maybe the small bar needs to mirror so the sales office is closer to Folly. Might help. the sales break and toilets were Folly side.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with I'm kind of struggling with staff comments and Dinos's comment that the short elevation facing Folly is less than we would expect to be the public facade. I'm not sure I want to look right into the washing container bay either, and I certainly wouldn't want to see hollow metal doors with louvers on them. So I don't think I could support the architecture as it is today. It seems like it's more interested in presenting itself to the neighboring publics than it does to the street Folly. It seems like it's got mixed up priorities, which, you know, buildings don't have backs these days. I'm aware of that. So, but this side looks like the back.
And if I recall correctly, the first submittal, maybe two submittals on the West Ashley design was oriented this way as well.
There might have been one, and then I know we had a submittal that didn't quite have it 100% parallel until we shortened the wash tunnel.
Right. And Denny, sorry, we're in board discussion time, so if we have a question, we'll let you know.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You know, I think we are kind of missing something. As you said, this is more the service side of this building than the front door.
Yeah, there's so much more opportunity, I feel, and I know this firm has the capacity and ability to really address it. I mean, it should be something on this scale gives you wonderful opportunities to make it a really interesting structure.
One other comment about site design. It seems like the sidewalk does its best to get out of the multi-use path. Go back to the site plan. The sidewalk shimmies right up next to the back of curb, and it might be a better experience if it were to come off the curb a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure if that's a requirement or is that just how it was and we're just replacing what it was, but it would be helpful if that sidewalk were to come off. It just feels like in general, there's a lot, we're asking a lot there's a lot of pavement for this little site. And yeah. And Andy, your point about the site wall not having the room to move, it just, maybe it's too much to ask of this site.
Yeah, I mean that, and there really isn't a sidewalk out there right now. And I think it goes back to what I'm saying about is, you know, if this thing could move and have some personality and the landscape can move with it, you know, I think it'd be far more interesting. And, you know, sometimes it's you're putting too much in the sack you got. And I think we might be at that point on this, but.
Any other comments or motion?
Just one other comment. On the tall portion where the car wash actually is, the angled roof, for instance, it could be so much more expressive in terms of the way that it sets itself and possibly even how it responds to the smaller rectilinear structure to the right. I'm looking at the east elevation right now. This is a tough one for me. I think that there are opportunities in what has been laid out. I don't know how I would structure a motion at this point in time that even I could support. I'd really like the architect to go back and restudy everything, but I mean, I don't know if a denial is really warranted. But I don't want to convey the sense that it's close to where it needs to be at this point in time. And what do you guys think?
I'd also just like to make one comment that hasn't been mentioned yet with the site plan. I'm probably not helping along, but one thing that I would encourage the applicants to consider in future reworkings of things is paying attention to not just to the main building, but the way that the dumpster location and all the vacuum locations are oriented. Sorry, my dog is shaking next to me. Are oriented because they're highly visible, you know, that whole north facade from the street. And I think there are creative things you could do with landscape walls or the architecture to make it so that we're not just staring at the vacuums and the dumpsters too. You know, I think that all of those elements should be better integrated into the site plan, using some of the approaches that other people have mentioned. But I want to just expand the comment to cover all of the various elements and not just the structure itself.
Very good.
It's a great.
One
point
other
of-
comment that I
Go
was
ahead,
going to make.
Dinos.
I was just going to make one other comment. One thing that we have experienced on other projects, particularly, and I think Jeff was wonderful and Andy at pointing these things out, is roof penetrations and what we're dealing with as far as you know, the penetrations and how they begin to impact the design of everything. And these are minimal amount of documents. And when you know, we were going through the design review board submittal requirements, and we're talking about 20% design development documents for conceptual submittal. This is probably about as minimal as you can get as far as a submission is concerned, and I'm struggling with being able to even respond to a lot of what we're seeing right now.
Well,
sorry.
the other really important items to consider with this building type is the lighting and the noise from the vacuums, and having some sort of acknowledgement about those important things on a small scale is important to understand. And to Aaron's point, the aesthetics of the vacuums themselves, that's a pretty considerable. With this site orientation, if it were oriented 90 degrees, that impact would be lessened. But now that it's perpendicular to Folly, those vacuums are going to be very prominent.
Any other comments or motion?
How do you guys feel about, I mean, I made the comment before about a more playful solution, something not nearly as serious with all the masonry and everything? Am I disagree? Am I off track?
No, I mean, I think that's a direction to go in. I mean, it does feel, I don't know if dour is the word to apply to a building, but it does feel very serious to follow your train. I do think there is some playfulness that could, you know, especially where it is.
Yeah.
I think it depends on how it's interpreted.
It's like when we have gas stations, right? It's preferred that the C-store is street side and the gas pumps are behind. And if they can't be that way, then the architecture has to be excellent.
I think that, go ahead, Jeff.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say the car wash on Cosgrove that we reviewed, and that's since been built. You know, that one was oriented this way, but because it preserved so many existing grand trees, it was a very unique circumstance, in my opinion, that warranted it. And also the view traveling on that side of the street was facing, you know, the main facade as well.
Yep.
And I thought from a design side, seeing it built, that was successful, but that is not an apples to apples comparison from that site to this site, in my opinion.
Agree. The one on Cosgrove was pushed back a little bit further from the street.
And we turned it,
Correct.
90 degrees, much like this one, but it has a lot more to the site. You know, this is kind of
Correct.
an open
it was a lot looser, less pavement, or at least felt less
Yeah.
pavement, a lot of existing trees, and I think some grand trees were preserved.
Yes.
And the material treatment on the smaller portion, the support component that runs parallel to the car wash itself, has been very successful as well. I'm happy to throw out a motion. I don't know how you guys are going to respond, and certainly if you don't agree, I know you will vote against it. But I've just struggled. I would again. Ooh, this is tough, but knowing the capacity of what this architect can do and having studied their website, I really do believe that there is something much stronger that they can come up with in translating these functions vertically again. And I would move for denial of the application on the basis of needing further thought in the way, first and foremost, how the building will present itself to the Folly Road. Secondly, a little bit stronger translation in terms of something, I hate to use the word, but more fun, something a little bit more playful with regards to the design. The third item is that this front elevation is so dependent on the signage of fence to break up the facade, that it's if that signage isn't there, then we get a blank wall pretty much with an opening in it on the prominent vertical component. I would encourage the applicant to be more expressive in terms of the design and the function of the building.
Okay, we have a motion for denial with board comments. 1, needing further thought on how the building will present itself from Folly Road. 2, stronger translation with regard to being more playful. 3, the main facade is relying too heavily on the signage for its design. Is that fair? Do you know?
That's fair, yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Andy has seconded the motion. I'll now call roll. Aaron, you're muted.
Sorry, I was thinking about my response anyway. So, yes, in agreement.
Jeff?
I am in agreement with denial.
And myself, yes, in favor of Dinos's motion as well. All right, thank you all very much. We're moving on to agenda item number 5, Glen McConnell Parkway at William E. Murray Boulevard, requesting preliminary approval for a new 4-story multifamily project with 4 buildings and 348 units.
You all have seen this project a few times, so I don't have any context. So if the applicant would like to begin.
Hi, this is Catherine Monroe with Housing Studio, the architect on the project. Do we also have Cassidy Michaud from DPR?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. I think we can start out, Erica, if we can just get a few extra minutes just in case we go long today.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah, I'm with virtual. I won't be too crazy strict on you.
Okay, much appreciated. Like David said, we're here tonight seeking preliminary approval for the Founders Yard multifamily project. Appreciate your time and consideration this evening. My name is Cassidy Michaud. I'm a landscape architect with DPR Associates, and I'll be walking through the site plan updates and the refinements to the landscape architecture design. Like Catherine said, she's with Housing Studio. She's with us tonight, and she'll be walking through the architecture. So David, can you go to the next slide, please? This is just the previous comments from the conceptual approval.
I'm sorry, do you want to?
Oh, no, that's all right.
Next one.
Slide's fine. Yep. So this is the overall updated site plan. A few things to note that have been added since our last submission. We have added the triangular planters as requested throughout the parking areas on the site. We've taken a look at and added additional landscape and landscape walls to the parking fingers to make them feel more court-like. The parking to the northeast of building number 1 has been revised to provide better site circulation, but everything else has fundamentally stayed the same. Next slide. Next slide. So we'll just walk through the site and these entry perspectives. This is just an aerial perspective of a view of, like, if you were over William E. Murray Boulevard looking into the site, and here you can see the different material combinations that we're using to define that entry sequence and that vehicular pedestrian plaza at the main building entrance. Next slide. Again, this is a ground level perspective of the same view. You can see the material combinations that we're looking at, and then also the enhanced landscape screening that we're including, both to define the entry sequence and then also screen the parking to the left and the right. Next slide. This is an aerial perspective of the building 1 courtyard. This would be the main building amenity courtyard. Really focused on working with the architects and the interior designers to create a seamless indoor-outdoor experience here. It's got passive and active recreation. We got a yoga lawn or fitness lawn. We have the pool and some outdoor kitchens. Next slide. Again, this is just a ground level perspective looking out towards building 2 from the building 1 courtyard. And then again, this gives you a better perspective of the material combinations that we're suggesting, and then also the planting form and masses. Next slide. So this is walking out of that courtyard towards building 4. You can see the pedestrian realm created and framed by the architecture of building 2 and 3 here. And also to note on this is the enhanced landscape screening that we're including both on the left and the right of the view here to screen those parking fingers and really define and create that continuous pedestrian path through the site. Next slide. So this is a view of as if you were in a vehicle going through the roundabout. Some things to note here are the material differentiation of the roundabout, and then again, the introduction of the triangular planters in the parking fingers and the enhanced landscape treatments. Next slide. Again, this is the courtyard between buildings 2 and 3. It's just showing the approach as you're approaching building 4 in the distance. You can see the breezeway connections between so sort of through building 4 back towards the tree save area and the dog park. You can see some of the passive recreation that we're creating in the building or in the courtyard number 2, and then also the landscape treatments that are starting to screen the parking areas. Next slide. So this is if you were coming out of the breezeway of building number 4, looking back towards building number 1. And a few things to note on this one are the continuous serpentine path that's working through this site, how we're creating a tabletop condition with both grade change and paving material differentiation to create a separation of the vehicular and pedestrian realm. We've also included low landscape walls for the previous staff and board comments and enhanced landscape screening to really define and differentiate the parking areas versus the pedestrian areas here. Next slide. And again, this is just an aerial perspective. If you were over top of building 4, looking out and back towards building 1, you can see the serpentine path that's kind of continuous, curving through the site and would be the kind of main pedestrian highway for the project. Next slide. This is an aerial perspective of building 4. So you have the breezeway coming in from kind of the main circulation on the left there. Mix of, again, active and passive uses. We're including another outdoor kitchen in this area, and also suggesting some outdoor fire pits or other passively engaged spaces. Next slide, please. And this is just a ground level perspective of that. To the left of this image, you can see through the breezeway out back towards building 1, You can also start to see some of the material combinations that we've been developing and some of the vertical elements in the landscape. Next slide. Again, this is just back a little bit further, looking back up towards that kitchen area, and you can see some of the different elements that we're including, and also, the suggested massing of the landscape as we work through that. Next slide. So this is, we've been continuing to define and refine the landscape and the hardscape palette, and this is where we're currently at with this preliminary submission. Next slide. Next slide. So I think these next 2 or 3 images, David, if you can just go through, these are just the civil site plan updates, photometric plan, and Catherine, if you can take the reins from here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cassidy. And again, Catherine Monroe with Housing Studio. I just want to thank everybody for their time this evening, and also for the time you've taken to review our submittal, especially Dennis and David, as they've taken time to work with our team throughout this process with comments. We're going to start on this slide. This is the perspective of the front entry of Building 1. And as Cassidy just presented, the arrival court is shown here with 2 different treatments at the surface there. We've incorporated the triangular planters with the palms into the design throughout the site, and we've taken care to really organize those with the architecture and with the bays of the building as we've set them up, support each other. And David, you can advance. One other thing I'm going to, with this slide, we wanted to also point out that you'll see in all of the elevations and renderings that per staff comments, we have replaced the balcony material, the heavy metal mesh, with vertical pickets and the double top horizontal rail and the double vertical in the center. We appreciated this comment from the staff because that gives all of the balcony elements a more vertical emphasis. So you'll see that throughout the elevations and the renderings. David, could you advance to slide 32, please?
Sure.
We did have some changes here on Building 2, so we wanted to jump to this. This is the front entry of Building 2, and Buildings 2 and 3 are mirrors of each other. So this would be the entry also on Building 3. But I did want to point out some changes that we've made in both of these buildings. David, can you advance to slide 35, please? So you can see here the changes from the previous elevation and the proposed. We've consolidated the building entrance from 2 down to 1 into this main entrance in the center element, incorporating an implied hyphen here in the center, having the canopy over the entry there in the center element, which focuses your eye more towards the center of the composition. And then we've shifted the vertical darker balcony stacks that are on the side flanking elements to the center bay, just to simplify the rhythm here. We've also added some darker elements rendered in the fiber cement panel as bookend elements to both of the short elevations. Next slide, please. You can see this here again in the proposed and the previous. This really helps to break down the boxiness that we were seeing in the elevation, adding this vertical darker element here to these 4 building elevations helps with this. Next slide, please. And this is also, we made some changes per staff comments, rendering for Building 4 at the entry, again here in the center element, which is the darker element in this implied hyphen area. We've removed the brick from the first and second levels per staff comments. Again, to simplify the building material palette, we've also added here some shade louvers up above the uppermost windows on that top level to really guide your eye up. And again, this is helping to simplify the overall elevation design. And David, can you go to 39, please? We also took staff and board comments to remove the brick at the lower and second level for the breezeway, the entry to the breezeway area. So you see this now rendered fully in the dark cementitious panel. Again, this was done to calm the material palette. This is the element, as you may recall from Cassidy's presentation. This breezeway entry is where, if you're looking back up through the project, you will see that entire serpentine path and all of the interior courtyard design moves that we've done to enhance that entire space. So the entry of this, we really wanted to make very calm. And so we appreciate that comment that staff had. If you could advance to slide 44, please. This was also in response to a DRB board comment. We all had wanted to see the interior of the breezeway rendered. So we've done that here in this rendered section. And again, the breezeway is on both ends of building 4. We've returned the same material that's on the exterior, the dark cementitious panel with the reveal into the breezeway, and then just set up a very simple rhythm of alternating panel and lap siding. The lap siding you see elsewhere on the project, so bringing in that design language here. And then we've shown the building lighting fixtures that would be necessary to light these breezeways, and just place them in a very simple repeating pattern right within the panel, the cementitious panel. And David, if you'd advance to slide 49, please.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
49, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Thank you. This is also, we wanted to include the detail, the enlarged detail that you see on the left, page left of this slide. This is a detail of the roof element. And there was a comment of the floating roof, trying to pay attention to that and be careful with the detailing in order to allow it to read very cleanly. And we also felt the same way about that too. So we've included this in our submittal, so you can see the detailing of the trim here, the flashing, the intention to keep it very clean. Next slide, David. These are our typical window details that we wanted to include as well. We're showing them in both the veneer materials. On the left, we have the masonry veneer, and then in the center, we have our cementitious veneer. We are showing the deeper recessed window. It's located at the second stud and the triple stud alignment. That allows us to have 2 layers of the cementitious trim on the exterior. And we're using also, you can see in these details, we're using the extra thick cementitious material, the 5/8 inch thickness, to be able to be very clear about the details, to give the windows, because we have so many windows in multifamily, we want to be able to recess that and see that relief where that happens. So we wanted to show that here. Next slide, please. This is our digital material board, and I just wanted to call out a few things on this. You should have also received a physical material board that we had shipped down, so you may have reviewed that as well. But first, I wanted to call out the brick that's being proposed in the lower right-hand corner of this image. This is a photograph of the brick in place as it's being used on a building in the Charleston area. We intend it with white mortar, so we wanted you all to be able to see that. And then we also, on this digital board, have the, yes, thank you so much for making that bigger. We also have, just to the left of that is an image of the lap siding and the thickened trim to, again, give that shadow line. This is not the color palette that is being proposed. The colors are just to the left of that, but this is indicative of the way the shadowing would read and the way we're detailing the siding and the trim. Also, we wanted to point out the window that we'll be using. This is a locally manufactured window made in North Charleston, the Muller All-American. This is a photograph of the window as it's used in a previous project we designed on James Island. You should also have received a physical window sample as well for your review. And with that, I believe that ends or concludes our presentation, and I'll turn it over to questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
Yeah, I had a question on the landscape plan. Do y'all have a labeled actual labeled landscape plan? See the concept in your palette, but I don't see a plan.
That should have been included, and I'm not sure if we had every individual plant labeled in the technical submission, but we included the plant palette or the plant schedule with the plant symbol in the full submission package.
Okay, I don't. David, do you know if it's in?
Well, I did include that in your Dropbox. I included both sets that they gave me. One's a presentation and one was a little larger. I don't have it at the, I mean, I could go get it from the network. I'm not sure.
I mean, I've got the larger set open, and I don't see a fully labeled landscape plan.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Andy, we may not have labeled every individual plans, but they should coincide with the symbols on. I'm pulling up the set. I'm sorry, I don't remember what sheet it was on.
I don't even see a schedule.
It's on. Let's see.
I have it here. It's
Yeah.
at the very end of that 100-page document.
L7.02.
Yeah.
Okay, I see it now. Thank you.
One question while we're kind of looking into that, just curious about this reveal system, fiber cement. Is it a system, or is it something the contractor just kind of put together? Is it a system on clips or something?
Yes, it has a reveal trim. David, can you advance to slide 51? We also included a photograph of this, so you can see in the lower bar of photographs, it's the reveal panel, or sorry, the fiber cement panel with a trim behind it. This was also mocked up in the physical sample material board that we shipped to you. And so you can see the trim the metal trim as it sits behind and lays into the two panels of cementitious material.
Sure. Is this system been installed here locally on one of y'all's other projects?
I am not positive of that.
Okay.
The image that you see in this photograph is a project we designed, and that's an image of a project that's about 10 years old in Charlotte.
Got it. One of the challenges around here, and we can talk about that later, there's plenty of projects that have used this system, but I just, as a warning to you to look out for quality, a lot of those, because of our high wind zone, dug on cement panel needs a fastening like every 4 or 5 inches. And those are just hard to putty and look right. Again, it's a product that's been used all over the county, so I can't tell you not to use it. But it does come with some challenges in terms of craft and quality.
Any other questions?
Yes, Catherine, thank you. This is Dino Saliolio. Can you talk a little bit, just because of the massing of the buildings, lighting, what is your lighting scheme as far as the project is concerned?
We are currently showing, I believe we submitted in our larger presentation, 3 different fixtures. So at the front of the project, David, if you could go back to slide 23. And we're currently working through this right now in terms of design, but actually, sorry, if you could advance one more slide, please. Oh, sorry,
One more,
slide.
the other,
Yes.
this way.
Or, no, can you go to, let's see, 25, I think. There we go. So we're showing very subtle lighting, what we wanted to select, and what we're showing in the larger submittal are bronze finished lighting. We have 3. We have one that is sort of an acrylic top and bottom, and that would be located here at the doors. It looks like the cut sheets are on page 77 of the full presentation. We intend to have those sort of brighter, more glassed fixtures at the front entry. And then we also wanted to have uplighting, very subtle, for the fins that you see here on the entry. That would not be seen, and it's something that we're still working through. So since it's not applied to the building, it would just be very subtle. We didn't put it in this submittal. It would be located behind the brick veneer there. But the primary lighting package would be those that you see in the submittal on page 77, with the entry sconce being the acrylic top and bottom, and then going to a more subtle sconce, the full can at some of the areas that are less publicly used, like the exit only doors, where we still wanted to have lighting there, but make it, downplay it a bit. We want the primary focus for the lighting to be at the building entries.
And signage, and forgive me, I see the large file now, it's 500 meg. Yeah. How about signage? Is looking at slide 25, your thoughts on any building signage?
Right now, we're showing a signage, the canopy sign there with the name of the project, Founder's Yard, finished in the same tone, the same color as the canopy itself. Right now, that's the only signage that we have shown at this time. There's a monumental sign for the project out at the street level, and that's been called out in the site plan. You can start to see the lighting there too. Yeah, if you zoom in.
Yeah.
Any other
Thank
questions?
While we're on the slide here, I'm just curious to hear about the concept between the brick arch that's going over that canopy you just described. What's the story with that?
So with this being the entry and the primary focus where everybody is coming in, the first impression, we did want to call out that entryway as something slightly different than the other areas, the other implied hyphens that are existing around the buildings and around the project. That is a bar, bridge, I guess you'd say, of masonry is intended to read as punch through, so that you get that depth of shadow that's a little bit more dramatic. And we wanted that to also feel anchoring at the same time. So those were some of our intentions around that element.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? We do not have any public comments, anyone registered to speak, nor did we receive any submitted comments ahead of the meeting. So David, staff recommendations, please.
Sure. This is David. Staff comment number one, the applicant has addressed most all of the staff board comments, other than adding more pavers to the north-south vehicle areas between the buildings. But they did make other improvements in these areas which staff is satisfied with. Number two, staff feels this project has evolved nicely, and we are in support of the applicant's design. We feel the applicant can move forward with final review by staff, and we do recommend preliminary approval.
Thank you, David. Board discussion and a motion.
Before we get started kind of talking about the project, I want to say that I did appreciate the thoroughness of the submittal. I thought it was a really well put together submittal. It had a lot of information that made me understand exactly how the building was going together from an architecture standpoint, and I want to thank the applicant for that. It was a very good submittal. And just as a point of note, I really appreciated those window details in particular and how they recessed the window back in the wall stud. That's exactly what the policy was written to do, and that's a perfect execution of it. So good job, applicant and team. Way to go.
Thank you very much.
This is Andy. I do think the package is really well done. I do appreciate the evolution of the project. I think my only comments is that we do typically see a labeled site plan at this stage. And I guess I just asked David, at final, I would like to see a final landscape plan with everything labeled. And I think the only plant material I think I would bring into question is I would call it garma grass, the blue garma grass. I think there's probably for this area, I'm not sure that will be as successful as it would be in other parts of the country. I do know it's a native plant, but it's more of a plant prairie grass. Maybe substitute that for either a Fakahatchee or a Spartina or something along those lines. But other than that, I think that it's a really good overall project.
Excuse me, Andy, can I just ask you to repeat that? I heard blue for the plant.
The blue garma grass.
Garma grass.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments or emotion?
I'd be happy to move for preliminary approval with the request of board comment that a detailed landscape plan, labeled landscape plan be provided at final.
And substitution of the single grass.
And substitution of the single grass.
Sorry, the single grass?
The gamma grass, I was just trying to keep you from having to stumble over it.
No problem. Okay, so we have a motion for preliminary approval with board comment 1, to provide a detailed landscape plan at final review, and 2, substitute gamma grass. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is there a second?
A second.
Dinos made the motion, Jeff made the second. I will now call roll. Aaron?
Yes, in favor.
Andy?
Yes, in favor.
And myself, yes, in favor. Thank you all very much. We will move forward with our final and last item on the agenda, which are approval of the minutes from June 15th, 2020. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Andy made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Aaron made the second. Dinos?
Yes. I vote in favor. I like to go a line by line item on every one of them. I'm just teasing.
Dinos, I'm going to come over to your house.
Jeff?
I approve of the minutes.
Jeff,
Approve of.
can someone mute Dinos? Thank you. And I also vote in favor, and we're done.
Wonderful. This was a tough meeting.
Thank you, everyone. I
And
did get my
David.
audio resolved. I didn't tell you all, but the guy who was up here fixed it. I could hear you all fine.
Good.
Good.
Very good. Are we still